Good morning and welcome to the second edition of Facebook Live, or Ardex Facebook Live. I hope, firstly, I hope everybody's safe and well out there and doing their best for them and their families to stay safe. Um, and the process of these sessions is to try and spread a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of learning while we are, unfortunately, or protecting out, looking after ourselves and looking after our families while we're at home. So today's session is about new build systems, new build projects, and I'm going to focus on concrete and sand and cement screeds today. Have a short discussion on them, and then we're probably going to have a session next week, next Tuesday's topic, unless somebody can suggest something different. We'll just solely be based around anhydrite screeds because we've been asked a lot. I've had a lot of messages sent to me in regards to anhydrite screeds. So we're going to do that just as a topic on its own next week because I think it's quite important. But today we're going to focus on new build systems when you're looking at concrete floors and sand and cement screeds. So we'll focus on that and obviously focus on the Ardex systems that you can use. Any questions at any point, if you please, type your questions in and I'll do my best to answer them questions as we go through. Hopefully I'll get round to as many as I can, and I will promise I'll try and follow up on any that I don't get round to today. And go from there. So, as you say, I hope you're all fitting well, and here we go. So, concrete. We've all seen it going down the roads in trucks, turning around on the back of the truck. Sometimes it's hand mixed on site, but most of the time it gets delivered to site in a truck. So, when a concrete floor is installed, from the day it's installed, it's poured or whatever you want to call it, they usually pour it in. They'll usually, or sometimes they vibrate it, beam it off to try and get a flat surface. And then what they'll do is some type of concretes they're trying to get a power floated finish. Now, when I first started in industry, most power floated finishes were for industrial areas and stuff like that. But now these power floated finishes seem to be cropping up everywhere, even in a lot of new build houses, especially when they're putting timber frames on top and stuff like that. So with a concrete slab, the concrete goes down. And from the day it's poured, it should be left for a minimum of 6 weeks. And the reason we say 6 weeks, that's got nothing really to do with the drying to fit a floor covering on. It's to do with the shrinking and curing process. In that initial first 6 week period of the concrete being poured or installed, it's losing quite a lot of moisture very, very quickly. So what that actually means is it's actually shrinking back or curing. And it's putting a lot of shear forces onto the product. So if you were to put a smoothing compound or a damp-proof membrane on top of a concrete that maybe is still going through that curing and shrinking process, or that rapid curing and shrinking process, then what can happen is the DPM or the smoothing compound could shear off the top. So it's something to bear in mind, something to think about when you're looking at or looking at new concretes. On jobs. Now, usually for us as floor layers, it's not too much an issue because the concrete gets poured and then they carry on building the walls on top of that, etc., etc. So it's usually had its 6 week curing and shrinking process. But we do get it sometimes in fast track work and that, but it's just something to bear in mind. Now, I've already just mentioned it. One of the surface finishes, or one of the things that they do to concrete, is they give it a power floated, or they try and give a power floated effect. And what they do to get that, obviously, they put a hardening and curing agent on the surface of the concrete most times. And then as soon as the surface of the concrete is hard enough to get on, it's not hard, it's hard enough to walk on and get the machines on, but it doesn't mean it's dry to fit a floor covering on. As soon as it's hard enough, they then use a best way to describe it is almost like an upside down helicopter. It's got all these trowel blades on the bottom and you'll just see them. They can even have ride-on ones now, and they're almost floating across the screed on these things and just polishing the surface. But that process makes that concrete very, very dense. Okay, very, very hard surface, very, very dense. And the issues you get with that is obviously drying is one, because when they do that sealing, polishing type of process, it seals in the moisture. And some of these power floated concrete slabs can take up to 2 to 3 years to dry out naturally in good conditions. So, it's very, very important that we take these things into account when we're looking at them. And the other thing is, if you've got a concrete like that you've put a hardening and curing agent has been put on the surface, ask yourself, if you're going to put a damp-proof membrane or a smoothing compound on top of that concrete, what are you actually sticking to? Is it the curing and hardening agent, or is it the concrete? And at most times, it's the hardening and curing agent. So the point I'm trying to get across there is, realistic with any power floated slab, really, we should be we should be it should have some sort of mechanical prep to remove the curing and hardening agent, but also to provide a good key. You almost like want an open textured surface to that type of concrete to apply, and then you can apply your smoothing compound or moisture vapor suppressants to the concrete. But ideally, power float concrete, we shouldn't be going direct. It should always have some sort of mechanical preparation. The other thing we so that's the power floated, more industrial type of concrete. And as I sort of recap, it's quite important that you've done that type of mechanical prep, and it's not just in industrial areas now. We're tending to be finding it in other types of buildings and so on. When I first started with Ardex, when we were doing our site support services and stuff like that, I was coming across a lot of resistance from big builders and companies like that, because they've paid a lot of money to get a power floated finish on these surfaces, and then I'm coming along telling them they need to basically remove it and give it an open texture. But most of these big builders have got used to that now, and they're a little bit more switched on, and they're not surprised anymore if we're telling them that. And it's that is in the standards. So that's that type of concrete. But then we got, it's basically the same stuff, but it's the concrete the builder puts in himself. The builder that's doing a small extension. Or he's building a house himself, and he might have the concrete delivered. Sometimes, if it's just a small conservatory, I have seen them before now, mixing it by hand. So they will install that concrete. Well, realistically, that type of concrete should be left for 6 weeks to allow it to shrink and cure. But what they tend to do with that type of concrete is, as they're putting in, not all builders, of course, but some, when they're putting in that concrete, they tend to add a little bit more water, maybe overwater the product, which can give you a surface latency on the surface. And you guys have probably seen it yourselves, where you walk into a job and the concrete where people have been walking actually looks quite clean, but you look towards the edges of the rooms where it hasn't been trafficked, then there could be like a white almost latency, which is a weak layer on the surface. So especially, builder's type of concrete that's been installed and hand troweled will still need some kind of mechanical preparation to remove any latency off the surface. And the other thing we need to think about with both power floated and the builder's type of concrete is any other contamination on the surface from other building processes, i.e. plasterers. Now, I hope there's no plasterers here today, but I always have a bit of a laugh. Not all plasterers, but some plasterers, they for some reason, they charge us for plastering the walls, and they do the floors for free. Yeah, if you've got a floor like that, it's heavily contaminated with anything really, but especially plaster, you've got to get it off. So most type of concrete will need some type of mechanical preparation. So just bear that in mind to do that. And whether it's power floated concrete or just normal type of concrete, always do a moisture test. I can't insist on that enough. Never just presume, never be told, like I said to you last week, that the floor is just dry. So that's them to be correct. And just to clarify, if concrete's got or sandstone screed's got underfloor heating in it, then it should always be commissioned. Now, and I've had it myself when I've been to sites where the builder has told me that the floor has been the floor's been the underfloor heating's been commissioned. And I said, well, explain the process. Well, we've pressure tested it. Well, pressure testing isn't commissioning. We It's got to have been switched on and run. So underfloor heating needs to be commissioned, and the concrete, once the concrete or screed has reached a suitable hardness, and for screeds that's 21 days, that the underfloor heating should be turned on uh, at an ambient temperature for 3 days. And then after that 3 day period, it should be raised up 5 degrees a day until it's got its max or its operating temperature. And then it should be run for a minimum of 4 days at that operating temperature. So it's quite important that they've gone through that. And you guys know probably more than me. You probably get it a lot more than me. That when you do go to site, um, the the underfloor heating hasn't even been switched on. So it's quite important that you ask these questions to make sure it is, and then it's vice versa. So it's the total opposite thing when you're cooling it down, yeah, and it's important that it's cooled down to lay your floors on. And with any concrete slab that you come across in the new build scenario, any expansion joints should always be brought through to the surface. Very important. Um, I see Matthew Guest asked a little question on lignite in new build. Well, lignite is basically it's almost more or less a form of coal that's found in where they're selecting the sand from. In the UK, they are allowed a certain percentage in the mix, but it does become a little bit of an issue when we are um, dealing with the floors, because what can happen is these little bits of coal or lignite, as they're called, can pop out and cause like little bubbles, little blisters underneath your floor coverings. So it's very important that they're dealt with. And what we recommend is, if you come across a floor with lignite, you should always be considering. Well, it should always be considering giving it a grind off or a clean up, see how much you can get rid of, and then it should be an epoxy primer, not uh, an acrylic type of primer, because moisture obviously can affect these. So we would always recommend, if you come across lignite, it should technically be an epoxy primer. But again, if you come across a floor with lignite, we're there to help. Just give us a call, and myself or one of my team will talk you through the process of dealing with that. But again, we'll touch on that next week when we come on to anhydrites, because I am finding quite a lot of anhydrites that do have lignite in them as well. So that's concrete, as you say. Just to recap, always make sure you carry out some surface preparation of some description. Always make sure the underfloor heating's been commissioned, and always do your moisture test. So we move on to sandstone screed. Whereas concrete needed 6 weeks to cure to allow it to shrink, sandstone screed only needs 3 weeks. But a few key things to think about with sandstone screed. Once you've installed a sandstone screed, technically it should be covered over for 7 days with polythene to stop it drying out too quick. Obviously, that should minimize the cracking you're going to get in it, but it also helps with the hardening. The longer they can keep the moisture in it in the beginning will help with its strength. Some companies do it, some don't, but it's quite important that that's done. And remember, after it's had its curing period, it's 3 weeks, still do a moisture test on sandstone screed. Don't rely on the builders to tell you it's dry. And remember, screed dries out a millimetre a day, or that's what they say, but that's an optimum temperature of 20 degrees and a 65% RH in the room. How often do we have that? Not very often at all. So most of the time you're going to come across these floors that are wet. James, a few customers asking, can Ardex NA be used outside? No, we wouldn't recommend it outside, unfortunately. We've got Ardex K301, which can be used externally, which is far, far more suitable product for that environment. I have done a video last week, which is you'll probably see it appear sometime this week, that tells you how to use Ardex K301. Okay, so back to standard cement screed, so 1mm a day to dry it. Obviously, if it's a thicker screed over 40mm, it's going to take longer than that recommended time. Other things to think about with standard cement screed, and some of you guys might have come across this. You come to site, there's lots of plaster drop-ins and that on the standard cement screed. You get a little bit of a scrape, and the next thing, you're through the surface of it, and you're basically into sand. You've sort of almost digging a little bit of a hole. A number of things could have caused that. Maybe the mix ratio wasn't quite right, or the amount of water in it wasn't quite right. So it could be down to the screed design. It could be down to compaction. Maybe wasn't compacted in certain areas for that reason. So that's something to think about. But if you ever get one like that, guys, just think, just by putting a damp-proof membrane or a smoothing compound over the top of that type of screed, if it's quite soft and weak underneath, then there's chances it could indentate. You could get from chairs, point loading and stuff like that. So my advice to you, if you come across one like that and you're scraping and the next thing you've got a few holes in it because it's quite weak, give us a ring. Give myself a ring or one of my technical support guys, and we will talk you through the process. It might need us or advise that a screed test, a drop hammer test is done on the screed to check the hardness and so on. But it might not necessarily be the end of the world, because Ardex have got a product called Ardex PSRS, which is a two-part epoxy system, very, very low viscosity. So when you mix this product up, it is basically like water, and you just pour it onto the screed and let it soak through. And just keep moving it around on the surface till it starts puddling, and then you know it's penetrated in. We do a sand blind finish on the surface, which hopefully you'll see in the video I produced last week, how to sand blind, and then that should consolidate the screed and make it as hard as it, or even harder than it originally was. So if you get a screed like that that's very weak, it's important that you do take advice, or you do look at it and do decide whether it needs some sign of consolidation or case hardening. So just something to think about. Again, if you get any cracks in the floors and stuff like that, it may be a crack that's occurred while it's been drying and shrinking, then you can always stitch that back together using the Ardex P10SR system, which for many of you might have seen the video last week. Stitch it back together and then it's good to go. So just some things to think about with standard cement screeds in new builds and stuff like that. So we've spoken about concrete. So just to recap on screeds, it needs a 3-week curing period. Ideally, it should be covered over for 7 days when it's initially installed to aid the drying. Always do a moisture test, and for everybody or anybody new joining us, if it's above 75% RH, then it will need a moisture control system of some kind, and I'm going to explain the Ardex systems in a minute. Shane, you've asked what's the biggest Ardex seller? It's got to be Ardex XNA, definitely. So that's standard cement screed. Now, if we think about it, if a standard cement screed's been left for 3 weeks, a concrete floor has been left for 6 weeks in good conditions, they should be below 95% RH, which then allows you to be able to use a moisture vapor suppressant on them screeds. As long as it's a new build and it's got a structural damp-proof membrane, then Ardex, we could use Mvs 95. Is there... Okay, I'll get to that one in a minute, Mike, hopefully. I'm just going to finish off so we can use a moisture vapor suppressant. So Ardex's basic moisture vapor suppressant is MVS 95, and I'm sure many of you have tried it and used it. Just some key things with with the MVS 95. It's ideal for new build systems, and that's what we're on about today. It's a more cost-effective system for new build. So the MVS 95, you've all seen the shape of the drum designed for a roller to fit in it. You'll get 36 square meters at 2 coats. But one of the key things is, as I've said earlier on, make sure you've done that surface prep. Remove any contamination. Get it mechanically prepared, ready. But the key thing is remove any fine particles of dust off the screed. Yeah, really get a vacuum out, a good quality vacuum, and remove the dust particles from the screed. And then we apply our MVS. Now it's important, and I'm going to touch on this, it's important that we apply the MVS correctly. Now I know most of you out there do, but I have come across the odd instance where people have been putting it on with screeding trowels, wall tiler squeegees and stuff like that. It will not work if you do that. It's got to go on with a roller. Yeah, ideally a short pile roller. So make sure you've done all your surface preparation, vacuumed it off, and then apply your first coat with a short pile roller in one direction. Let that go off. Usually takes about 30 minutes in good conditions. Once the first coat's gone off, apply a second coat in the opposite direction, and it's quite important that you do them in the opposite direction to give you a cross-linked effect to get the system to work. So you put your second coat on, and that usually cures in about an hour. But because of site conditions and different things, we've actually said 2 hours on the drum. And the good thing about the MVS 95 is any one of our smoothing compounds will then go direct to the surface within a 24-hour window. So you've got 24 hours to get your smoothing compound on the surface. If you've left it longer than that, then you're going to need to give it another coat of MVS, not primer. So very easy to apply. As you say, really good coverage, and it's fast way of dealing with new build screeds. And any one of our smoothing compounds will go direct to the surface. Just something to note, so everybody understands, is Ardex MVS 95 should not be used where an air temperature is below 10C and the substrate temperature is below 5C. So and we shouldn't really be installing these things, but it's something to think about. Okay, so that's our new build for dealing with the damp. Okay, so if you've got a damp sand cement screed and it needs a moisture control system, as a cost-effective new system, it would be MVS 95. Obviously, as long as it's got a structural damp-proof membrane and your reading is below 95% RH. And of course, if you're struggling to get a reading and it's a reasonable size project, don't be frightened to get in touch with Ardex, and we will go out and moisture test the site and give you a full written specification to go with that. Okay, so please use that surface service if you've got a reasonable size project on. Okay, and then as a cost-effective solution for your new build, we could use we've got Ardex CL, which is a 2-part smoothing compound. I'm sure many of you have tried it. If you haven't, please do. Really um, good smoothing compound. It's got really good flow characteristics and will go from 3 to 10 mil over the MVS. And CL, walk on after 2 hours, and you can fit a floor covering after 12 hours. But one of the things for CL for me is its flowability. It really does flow. I've spoke about new build, doing moisture tests and stuff like that. If you are lucky enough to get a new build that is dry, so it's below 75% RH, again, CL is a very cost-effective system, which does require a primer. So you would prime the floor with Ardex P51 primer, usually diluted 3:1. The ratios are on the tin, of course. Apply it with a broom. let the primer go off and then CL direct to surface, so you can use it that way. So that's a good cost-effective system for a new build if you're a user of two-part latex base, or we call them latex, but a two-part type of smoothing compound. Or you've got the option now of Ardex K39, and if you haven't used Ardex K39, please give it a try. It's a water mix product. So it's mixed with water, really easy to mix up, but it's got exceptional flow characteristics. It really does flow well. But the benefit of using Ardex K39 is the flowability. It really does flow, and it gives you a 40-minute wet edge. Yeah, so you've got 40 minutes really for it to flow out. And if you spike roller, any edges that you do have reactivate when you use the spike roller, and it just drops out. So really good, easy system to use. And even though it's got a 40-minute wet edge, you can walk on that one after 2 hours and fit a floor covering after 24. So um, really good system for new builds. We have got another product called Ardex F8. Well, we've got quite a lot of products out there. We've got Ardex K11, which you can use in new build as well. And please refer to the Ardex website for any information on any of them products. So and then what I'd like to do, and then I'll try and go back to some of the questions. We'll just try and, as a system, so if we're going to use MVS 95, and let's say we've used CL, to keep it as a system, and it's always good to work with manufacturer systems, you might want to choose one of the Ardex adhesives, something like our Ardex AF 145, our PS, yeah, ideal for LVTs and other vinyls and stuff like that. We also do a wet set, so Ardex AF 175, which is suitable for LVTs. When you wet setting, so when you've dry fitted some areas and installing it after you've dry fitted, I quite like the 175, really good adhesive. And then don't forget, if we're working in areas of high solar gain, so conservatories, somewhere where there's south facing windows, we should be thinking of a stronger adhesive, something like our Ardex 2575, our 1K, which is ideal for them environments. Excuse me. And then also if you're doing schools, colleges, big jobs where you're putting down vinyl sheet or gluing down carpet, we've obviously got the Ardex AF165 or AF325, which is one's our vinyl adhesive and one's a carpet adhesive. But what you get there is you get a really good system for it to cost-effective system. So you get your system warranty as such. So just going to go back to a couple of these questions. I don't know whether I lost anybody there. Try and pick up some of these. Richard's asked about the fibres in the screed. Well, obviously fibres help try and hold it together, try and stop the cracking process and stuff like that. But we do get a lot of fibres sticking to the top of the sticking out the top of the screed. It is important that you remove them. Yeah. That could be a very sharp razor scraper. I have seen people burn them off, etc. But the key thing is really important that you remove them, because that fibre could stick through your MVS or your damp-proof membrane. So it's important that you remove them. What other questions we got there? Have there been any recent changes to the British standard in relation to the Ardex products? Not really, nothing that's affecting us at the moment. The best place to check that everything's up to date is look at obviously the data sheets for the products, Rob, and any significant changes will be obviously amended on the data sheets, but there's nothing really outstanding at the moment that I can think of off the top of my head here. Something might come to me after that I need to mention. In the tiling world, it has, in regards to tanking for shower rooms and stuff like that, and using plywoods, you should be using cement boards, but not in the flooring world at the moment, but we will get around to that. Mike's asked, is there a test? There isn't really. It would be great if we could just get a little bit and pop it in a little test tube and it turns a certain colour to tell us whether it's gypsum or concrete. Unfortunately, we haven't got one at Ardex at the moment. But it's always worth asking the questions. Sometimes I know it's quite difficult. Sometimes builders don't really know what they've had put in themselves. But if you're never not sure, again, get in contact with us. We'll come and have a look as well, and we'll try and find out some more details and go from there. Okay. Let's see what else we've got there. Simon, I see NA peeled straight off 90. I presume that's 95. Again, please, if that, disappointing that's happened, we would need to look at that and investigate why that might be the case. But one of the things that we do find, and I will mention it, is, and I'm not saying this was the case at all, but sometimes we do get where MVS has been left sort of open and exposed for a while, and you get a lot of contamination from people just walking across it and stuff like that. And it's very important that people don't traffic these floors in between coats. I'm not saying this, but Simon, please get in touch. Drop me a message later, and we can follow up on that, and I can try and find out what might have happened there. Okay. What have we got there? Paul, what size would you consider being reasonable? Is that in regards to site support? We wouldn't go to Mrs. Jones's downstairs toilet, but if it's a reasonable sized project, ground floor of a house or something like that, or even if it's something unusual, if you're a good customer of Ardex and you need some support, we will come out to it, even a reasonable sized domestic kitchen, as long as you're a good user of Ardex. But if you've got a large project on, please get us involved. Any more? I'm just flicking through. Can CL be used under a DPM or moisture vapor suppressant? Gary, good question. Right, new build. It's got to have a structural membrane in the building. You could use CL underneath an MVS. Okay, we wouldn't recommend it under DPM, but we'd recommend it under MVS. So what we would have to do, as long as the floor is below 95%, is prime the sand and cement screed with P51 primer diluted 7:1, and I make sure you apply that with a broom. Then put your Ardex CL down, let that cure it, then a coat of MVS 95, and then another coat of Ardex CL. So you could do it that way as a cost-effective new build if need be. So if you do need to pre-smooth, but it's important that you follow that system. Okay, so Shane, again, you've asked what the smallest size job that you guys will spec, and I think I've covered that. As long as it's, as long as you're an Ardex customer, then yeah, we'll support you as best we can. Okay. What else we got there? Empty new house. So Simon, Simon, probably best thing to do is message me after this or give me your details and we'll have a look at that and follow it up. Okay, got no issues. We need to know these things and then we can see what's going on there. Okay, so I hope that you found that useful in regards to concretes and sand and cement screeds into new build. I hope I've covered a couple of little things that you might not have thought of before, just to jog your memories and just share a little bit of our knowledge with you guys. What else have we got? Oh yeah. I know, unfortunately, a lot of you, are not completing, a great deal of work at the moment and stuff like that. But what we have decided to do at Ardex is that usually when you see us at trade events and stuff like that, we're not doing that many at the moment. But we'd like to still offer you the chance of getting your hands on the Ardex t-shirts. Okay, so what we're going to ask you guys to do today is just drop us in some pictures of some past jobs you might have done using Ardex products, of course, and send them in to us via Facebook or other social media, Twitter or so on. Send them in to us. We'll pick out 10 to 15 of the best ones, and we'll send you a t-shirt and a adhesive trowel to go with that as a bit of a thank you. We always like to see what people are doing out there, and and moving forward. And don't forget, at this time, if you are out there working and you're struggling to get site support or some advice, then we are available. We are open. If you'd like to send in some pictures, contact me via other message and other social media networks and send me some videos from sites. We can we can try and deal with it that way. Mike Davis, can we buy a Ardex vacuum extractor? Of course, of course. Best thing to do again is drop us a private message after this, and we can sort out that for you, Mike. Not a problem. Somebody's asked, can we have some bacon sandwiches? I think, judging by the amount of time I spent at home, I got to stay away from them, Rich. Okay. But maybe when we're back out at the trade shows, we'll sort you out some bacon sandwiches if you see you. Which other manufacturers, subfloor prep, which other, that's a good one, Mike. Which other subfloor prep manufacturer do you admire and why? We're all out there to do a purpose. So it's not fair for me to favour any of them really, but we are out there to to all service purposes, and we're all giving sort of relevant information to contractors out there, and we're all after best practice in the industry. So I hope that sort of answered your question. Any more before we go, Richard? It looks like we're going to have to buy Rich a sandwich. I'll just flick back up through. One of the things if anybody wants to, obviously you've noticed I've been doing a few videos from home, which has been quite interesting. But if anybody wants to see a video from home, they want me to demonstrate something, I can do that, and you just need to drop us a line and let us know what you'd like to see. The Ardex range, we can even look at doing some using one of our rapid setting screeds, maybe, if it was something you'd like to look at. But just have a think about it, have a look through the Ardex range, and if you wanted to see a product, we could set it up and do a video and show you that. So that's about it for me in regards to new builds. As I say, next Tuesday I'm going to talk about anhydrites. Please tune in, and we'll try and cover how to deal with these issues that we're coming across with anhydrites. We'll make that a subject on its own, and then move on from there. I think that's it. So basically, thanks for your time, guys. Another good morning. Some good questions by everybody, and everybody that has logged in today and has been busy sending me questions. I'm going to say thank you from me, especially not just from Ardex, but from me, because it makes it easier than me just staring at a screen, talking away when I've got questions coming in that give me a chance to answer. So thank you to everybody there, guys. And at this time, don't forget, we are on the end of the phone. If you need any products, if you're struggling to get hold of anything, you need anything, please get in touch, and we'll find a way of helping you as best we can, because we're conscious that you guys need to, if you need to be out there working, and you need to be, especially if you're working on some of these big hospital projects and stuff like that. If you're struggling, please get in touch, and we'll do our best to support you guys in what you're doing. Okay, so that's about it. Don't forget to get your pictures in for us, and we get the t-shirts sent out, and so on from there. So again, thanks guys, and I'll see you all next week.